Greetings and welcome, or hopefully, welcome back. Thank you for joining us. We're glad to see you. Before we begin, please consider giving that like button a little love. It misses you. And perhaps, maybe subscribing, helping the channel grow. Now, on with the story. The Deathworlders, a story by Philip R. Johnson, aka Hambone, Hambone 3110, and Hambone HFY. Chapter 14, The Hornet's Nest. Part 1. Date point, 3 years, 8 months, 2 weeks, AV. 14.
Another failure.
23.
There have been victories also.
14.
Too few.
3.
The efforts of the discarded work to our advantage.
6.
As I recall, 3, you were among those who advocated their termination.
3.
Your point.
6.
An acknowledgement of your fallibility would seem fitting.
4.
Petty bickering like that is for the hosts. 3's competence is not in doubt.
6.
As you say, 4.
14.
To address the observation, yes, the discarded have helped contain the Deathworlders. That is a balance of power that will shift as things are going. They buy us time, not victory.
16.
Agreed.
31.
Agreed.
4.
Agreed.
6.
Perhaps a more senior agent should be placed in charge of that cell.
23.
72's competence is also not in doubt.
3.
Your naysaying is becoming unconstructive, 6.
14.
The problem is escalating. This most recent failure was not orchestrated by a Deathworlder at all.
19.
Are you proposing that the hosts might become energized and inspired?
14.
I am proposing that they already are.
System notification. User 20 has joined.
6.
Well now, you grace us with your illustrious presence.
4.
20 assumes more risk than any of us. You will be respectful.
20.
6's respect is not required. I have completed my analysis of the debris field.
6.
Please enlighten us. What miracle have the Deathworlders performed this time? Can they turn their skin to steel and shoot lasers from their eyes?
4.
6?
6.
20's last report implied that the Deathworlders had solved the single-end wormhole problem. I will not apologize for my skepticism.
20.
No such inconsistencies. They appeared to have an agent. A fast ship passed through the area shortly before the strike. I believe that it deployed tiny satellites which self-destructed after the battle. If those satellites were stealthed and carried displacement beacons, then it would explain the observed ability of these new ships to jump inside the sphere of engagement.
6.
It took you this long to determine that?
20.
Without compromising myself, yes.
6.
Useless.
System notification. User 6 was muted by User 4. Reason: correct your attitude.
14.
That was satisfying to watch.
4.
Correct yours too, or you will be next.
20.
I will not apologize for exercising discretion, caution, and patience. Infiltrating the discarded was difficult enough last time. They are not stupid.
2.
6 may be abrasive, but dissenting voices are valuable. They may cast the light where we are afraid to shine it. Soothe your wounded pride and examine the facts. The Deathworlders move quickly.
If we are to successfully contain and destroy them, then we all must be similarly swift.
System notification. User 6 was granted speaking privileges by User 2.
6. At least somebody here pays attention. 2. We have not granted you license to be disrespectful. 6. Yes, 2. 20. With respect to, avoidable setbacks will only serve to slow us in the long term. Hasty and ill-advised assaults have already cost us too much. The next must be slow, must be stealthy, must be unanticipated, and must be devastating. 8.
The evidence does appear to favor that.
20.
We must also put aside our power politics for now. 0 and 13 both failed because they acted alone in search of glory, and now they both need replacing. Now, 24 has gone the same way. We must stop allowing them to pick us off one by one. This is too important for ego.
5. You do not tell higher ranks what we must do. 20.
Then I respectfully suggest that we all set aside our pride and focus on combining our efforts to bring the practical resolution to this crisis.
2. 20 has a duty to express their opinion in as forceful a manner as it is necessary for its proper communication. You, 5, have a duty to heed what is said rather than overlooking it for the sake of pride and decorum. 5.
Yes,
2. 2. We do not yet need to involve 1. If 20's approach is successful, if we collaborate to deliver a single, unforeseen, and decisive blow to the Deathworlders, then 1 will never need to know this whole debacle ever happened. 4.
I still say that it was an unforgivable oversight not to foresee that intelligence might arise on that planet a second time.
6.
2. May I have permission to remind 4 that she was in equal part responsible for that oversight?
4.
How dare you!
2. We believe you just did. Our permission would be redundant. 4.
I request a punishment.
2. Denied. The observation is accurate, and even insubordination has its value. Nevertheless, 6, a little less insubordination, please. 6. Of course, 2. You only had to ask.
System notification. User 4 has signed out.
94.
The Deathworlders call that a rage quit, I believe.
57.
Apt.
14.
Can we focus, please?
6.
Agreed. What do you recommend,
20. 20.
The discarded.
14.
Sensible. They have already declared motive. They will seize the opportunity if it arises, and our risk of discovery will be negligible.
10.
We will need to remember to continue to monitor the Deathworld after the scouring is complete.
6. We will also need to resume monitoring on all the ones that have already been scoured. Some of them are nearly as old as Earth. 14.
You use their name for it?
6.
Strakel is so old-fashioned, and both names have a bit more life to them than MY-31043-3-TT12-I, don't you think?
23.
Whatever 6 calls them, we need to resurvey more than 1,000 planets to make sure they are still clear.
5.
If that survey discovers even one nascent civilization, then it will have been worth the trouble.
20.
I must go. I will do what I can to keep the great hunt high in the minds of the discarded.
System notification. User 20 has signed out.
2. Meanwhile, the rest of us will cease to engage the Deathworlders piecemeal. We must deal with their homeworld first before any attempt can be made at clearing out whatever last little holes and hideaways they may find.
3. The first object in support of that goal will be the identification and termination of this agent of theirs.
6. Wrong. The first objective in support of that goal will be the identification and conversion of this agent of theirs. 3.
2. I request permission to punish 6's insubordination.
2. Denied. Cease petitioning us every time 6 offends your pride. You should also cease to be so easily irritated by accurate corrections. Identification and conversion of this agent will become our top priority. Discussion concluded.
System notification. Session closed. System notification. Private session between user 2 and user 6. Session opened.
2. Your attitude does warrant our attention, however. We are a hierarchy, remember. You should remember your place. 6. I am the foundation for those above me. My role is to support and strengthen them all. 2. Well recited. We assume you are making a point. 6. Pride is a weakness. It is the weakness, in fact, that has cost us the most against these Deathworlders. I judge that my duty to the strength and success of the hierarchy and the indefinite survival of our people outweighs the tradition of decorum. It is not my duty to, as the humans so eloquently put it, kiss their asses. 2. And that is why we are demoting you to 72. 6. I see. I'm to take over from the current incumbent discreetly? 2. Indeed. You care about the result, not about your rank. That atypical approach may be of use here in this atypical scenario. 6. And if you're very lucky, your report to 1 will mention the humans only as just another scoured species. 2. We intend not to rely on luck.
System notification. Session closed.
Date point. 3 years, 8 months, 2 weeks, 3 days, AV. San Diego, California, USA, Earth. The man standing in front of him needed to clear his throat 3 times before it cut through the fog of fatigue that had Gabriel's mind in a chokehold and his forehead pressed to the desk. He looked up and stole a swig of his almost too cold coffee before addressing the man in the suit who was waiting patiently for him. "Help you?" he asked. The man smiled and produced a card. It was small, white, and mostly filled with the man's face and the badge of the Central Intelligence Agency. "Agent Hamilton," he said by way of an introduction, then aimed a thumb over his shoulder at a woman in a nearly identical suit whom Ares hadn't even noticed. She had a black leather work folder under her arm and was holding 3 Starbucks coffees in a cardboard carrier. "This is Agent Williams."
"You want the latte, the mocha, or the Americano?" she asked, offering the coffee.
Gabriel blinked, then managed to get his brain into second gear.
The latte, thanks."
She handed it to him, and he took a sip, grateful for coffee that was the right temperature and tasted a damn sight better than the copper-tasting poison the coffee's overworked percolator produced.
"Please, sit down." "I'd ask what the agency is doing here, but I'm guessing it has something to do with a guy in New Jersey,"
he said, taking a not-so-wild stab in the not-so-dark. After all, he'd seen the news. Williams nodded. She had taken the Americano and set down the folder on Gabriel's desk.
"A Mr. Ravinder Singh's apartment was bombed in the small hours of yesterday morning, killing the occupant and 3 of his neighbors," she said. "That seems more like a police or bureau matter."
"His name wasn't Ravinder Singh," Hamilton added. "He was one of the top men in the Indian nuclear weapons program who went missing a few years ago, and now he's turned up dead in a bombing on the East Coast. To me, that seems a lot like an agency matter."
"I didn't know that part," Ares confessed.
He indicated the folder.
"May I?"
Williams turned it around and opened it for him. They sipped their coffees patiently as he skimmed the documents within. It was clear why they had come to him. A still recovered from the camera above Singh's door offered a clear identification for Kevin Jenkins. It was stapled to a summary of the legwork that had gone into tracing him. It wasn't a long summary. Jenkins collecting his bag at Newark, his boarding pass, Jenkins going through security at San Diego International Airport, Jenkins checking out of the Bristol hotel, a bit of luck, and the receptionist remembering that he had mentioned being in town for a funeral, cross-referenced against the times he entered and exited the hotel to Terry Boone's funeral. And that, in turn, had led them to her family, who had pointed them to Aris. Most of the investigation would have consisted of the coast-to-coast flight. "You don't have much on him yet, do you?" he commented, noting that aside from Jenkins' name, there was precious little of his personal details in the folder. "That's why we're here," Hamilton replied evenly. "You had a good long conversation with him at that funeral." Gabriel sat back, took another swig of his coffee. "Yeah, I sent him to talk to Singh. He was close to the victim. She was a PI. Shot dead an assailant about 6 months before the second assailant got her. She knew she was in trouble and cited Singh as a witness who might be able to reveal the motive." "Could Jenkins have thought Singh was responsible and taken revenge?" Williams suggested. "No," Ares told them, not even bothering to conceal how little he thought of the idea. "He went to talk to Singh to try and get at the real responsible party. No sign of him since?" "His rental car was returned, and there was a possible ID at a gas station heading north, but that's all I know so far," Hamilton told him. "Let me spare you the legwork. He'll have gone to Scotch Creek." The two agents did a synchronized glance at one another, then back at him, letting their expressions make the demand for elucidation. "He said he's the bartender up there," Gabriel clarified. "The bartender?" Williams repeated skeptically. Hamilton coughed. "Thank God for that. If he's a civilian base staff acting on his own, then it's a lot less of a problem than the Canadian military getting involved in a bombing down here." Aris frowned. "They're our allies and friends, aren't they?" "They are, but allies and friends go through official channels over stuff like this," Hamilton said. "Canada's already catching a lot of political flack over their monopoly of alien technology. If there was any suggestion, right or not, that they'd sent an agent down here who'd bombed an American building and killed American citizens, it'd put a serious dent in any relationship, however good." "Not to mention the repercussions abroad," added Williams. "Entiendo. Well, I guess you know who to make the call to, so you can go through official channels." "Sure, and thanks, but I'd like to know more about this murder. You think they're related?" "The victim claimed as much, and I'm convinced," Ares allowed. "You guys have open minds?" "Hard not to nowadays," Williams said, indicating the TV that was always playing quietly in the corner of the office, tuned to the news. The financial news was nothing but coverage of the partnership between several major companies, led by BAE, BHP, Billiton, and Red Bull, to collectively enter the lucrative market of asteroid mining, a feat that would have been impossible only 3 years previously. The news of the partnership had sent stocks in the involved corporations soaring, but the value of several elements, especially platinum, had all taken a serious hit. It was just the latest in the long and storied drama of what was becoming known as the second space race. Gabriel nodded. "Then let me show you the evidence that she left," he said. Date point: 3 years, 8 months, 2 weeks, 3 days. Planet: Govendradovin, Dragovin, Egrugnov, Enderelgareg, Ugendavug, Govnaragovendragun Confederacy, Dominion Corps. The annual Ugundavug Vendrundraneg, the World Storm, was in its second day and approaching full force, powered by a quirk in the tidal dance of the Govnarag homeworld's 3 moons. This year's looked set to be a relatively mild one, with only 3 dark striations of lightning-blistered cloud having so far formed from the angry black girdle around the equator, to lash out northwards and southwards towards the poles. Such a comparatively gentle storm would easily be handled by the layers of storm protection installed by hundreds of generations of Govnarag, from the simple earthworks and storm drains to channel and disperse the flash floodwaters, to the more modern innovations like the tidal barrages, the artificial barrier reefs, and the huge force fields that needed most of the year to charge. In truth, The Governorag were quite capable of enduring the Agundavug Vendrundreneg out in the open, huddled in a warm ball of furry bodies. Their thick, shaggy fur was equally adept at warming and waterproofing, and their large size meant a low relative surface area combating the effects of cold and exposure. But it was by no means a safe or pleasant way to weather the storm, and most of the major engineering feats of Governorag history had arisen from the need to conquer their planet's annual weather tantrum. All of which was a little academic from geosynchronous orbit, of course. Space was infamously short on weather of any description, but it was hard for Councillor Vedrig of the Dominion Security Council to look down on the planet of his birth during this most iconic season and not reflect on such things. Especially, he considered, when he was quite improperly being left waiting. The Confederacy's Secretary of Security was uncharacteristically taking her time, implying that something had come up which was important enough to keep her direct superior waiting, and uninformed, which seemed thoroughly unlikely, or else there had been an unexpected delay. When she arrived, however, the Secretary's flanks were throwing an incandescent, furious crimson. She was, by any sapient being standards, in a roaring snit to match the fury their homeworld was unleashing upon itself at this very moment. Governorag folklore had always claimed that a gentle world storm meant turbulent times ahead, as all the energy the world failed to release was diverted elsewhere. Vedrig, as with all modern Governorag, dismissed this as superstition, but right now it seemed to be eerily prescient.
"Secretary Mired Negnell," he greeted her properly, "shall I, just this once, dispense with the formalities and inquire as to what has precipitated your anger?"
Mired crashed down into her chair, vibrating the ornaments on her desk.
"One of the missing system shields has reported in," she declared.
"I see."
Vedrig sat rather more gently in his own seat. The theft of two of their system defense fields, a pair that had been manufactured for delivery to two of the Dominion's most vulnerable frontline staging worlds to keep the pressure on the Alliance, had been deeply embarrassing for the Confederacy, not least because even their best investigators couldn't figure out how it had been managed. While the handling facility had reported a ship landing and departing around the time of the theft, the timing was simply impossible. Nothing could have covered the intervening distance so quickly without being detected.
"May I ask where?" he inquired.
"The far reaches," Mired replied.
Vedrig shaded a worried brown. That was bad news for any hope of recovery or investigation. The far reaches were aptly named. Distantly removed from the Dominion core, that region had only ever been accessible along a small number of space lanes, most of which had filled in with interstellar gas and dust from lack of maintenance thanks to the war. While the tiny particles were no threat to a starship, the burst of high-energy particles they emitted upon entering the warp field could ionize the hull and degrade the ship's systems, or even build up a lethal capacitance that, if it discharged, could fry equipment or unfortunate crew. Even navies, pirates, and even the hunters preferred to stick to the cleared space lanes where they could. The few lanes that remained open in the area passed through annexed Kelsey space and were heavily checkpointed. Sending a lane-clearing fleet to open a new route would take several cycles, even if the Alliance left them alone. All in all, the news of the System Shield's new location was frustrating, even if it did come with the saving grace that it apparently hadn't fallen into Alliance hands. The Alliance. Something about the Alliance. The memory tickled at him, elusive until he interrogated his cybernetic memory enhancement chip, which gladly supplied him with the connection between the Alliance and the far reaches.
"Where in the far reaches, may I ask?" he inquired.
"Some private retreat planet with one of those terse quartile names," the Secretary told him. "Why?"
"It wasn't Cimbrian, perchance?"
"As a matter of fact, it was."
She shaded pink and teal, a cocktail of surprise and curiosity.
"You're familiar with it?"
"Oh, dear."
Date point: 3 years, 8 months, 2 weeks, 3 days, AV. San Diego, California, USA, Earth. Taking your work home with you, Gabe? Aris smiled. Detective James Jimmy Rowan was the closest thing he had to a good friend amongst the homicide detectives, and the two of them often backed each other up as partners. The CIA is getting involved now. I need to get it all sorted out for them, he said. The briefing with Hamilton and Williams had taken several hours as they had gone through all of Boone's bequeathed findings and suspicions. Followed by the fruits of Gabriel's own research, superior as his resources were, he had other cases to worry about, and so hadn't been able to put the time in that he would have liked. The agency, man. Jimmy leaned back in his chair, sucking on one of the Tootsie Pops that were supposedly helping him quit smoking. Hell of a fucking thing. Nice guys, I thought, Gabriel commented. Not like your Ray-Ban wearing spook pendejos from those movies you love. Yeah, reality's more boring, Jimmy agreed. Hey, don't blow both your days off on that folder, okay? Go out and get drunk. Get laid. I was just gonna watch NBA, man. Come on. You can't have had any action since your divorce, bro, Jimmy insisted. Just because your balls need constant maintenance so they explode doesn't mean mine do, Gabriel replied, smiling. Yeah, I know. Still not ready yet, Jimmy gave up. Enjoy your basketball, man. Gabriel lived only a few minutes' drive from the precinct, in a nice but inexpensive apartment with a decent view of downtown. Most days, he didn't even bother driving to work. Instead, he changed in the precinct locker room into his sweats and jogged home, keeping his fitness up and working out the kinks and tensions of sitting at his desk for so many hours. The exercise allowed his brain to freewheel, too. It was nice to get out of cop mode and just be Gabriel for a while. But where Detective Ares was a cool and efficient professional, Gabriel was a worrier. The bombing, the CIA's involvement, the casual brutality that had been inflicted on Terry Boone for digging exactly where he was digging now. If he'd bothered to drive in, he might even start checking his car for explosives. As a result, he was in a strange mood when he got back to his apartment building, physically relaxed but mentally tense. He knew he was jumping at figurative shadows, but he couldn't forget that the first time he'd met Boone, she'd just shot dead an intruder in her own apartment. An intruder who had very obviously been there to kill her. And the lights were on in his, as was the TV, and he could hear it. This fact gave him several moments' pause. He could see the glow under the door, and right now all his mind could spring to was that parking lot and the carnage that had spread all over it. He retrieved his gun from his bag and loaded it as slowly as he dared. He turned the key in the lock as quietly as he could, slipped inside, and ghosted along the hall carpet until he could poke his head gently around the corner and into the main room, ready to snap it back at the first hint of danger, convinced that his pounding heart would alert the intruder to his presence. Somebody was sitting on his couch. His face was an unreadable skull mask in the television glow, and he definitely shouldn't have been there. But there was no possibility that Gabriel could fail to recognize him. Date point: 3 years, 8 months, 2 weeks, 3 days, AV. Planet Govendrudavan, Dragavna, Grugnavenderel, Gureg, Agundavug. Governor Agvendragun, Confederacy, Dominion Corps. There was a pirate organization that approached the Security Council some time ago. Their leader had come up with a novel new idea.
Pirates? I wasn't aware the council was in the business of negotiating with murdering scum.
These ones, Vedrig's flanks rippled through the many colors as he hunted for the correct word, underpinned by a constant theme of awkward yellow, introduced us to a new concept. Privateering, they called it. He pronounced the English word very carefully. It fit awkwardly in the Governor Ag mouth.
And what does that word translate as?
As they explained it, effectively, a privateer accepts amnesty from one government for their crimes in return for confining their predations to the shipping of that government's enemy. He shuffled uncomfortably. They also made it explicitly clear that they intended to allow any ship which simply surrendered and handed over their cargo to leave, alive and intact, and that they would stamp out any pirate competition in the area.
Myriad's flanks glowed like embers, aghast. "And the council agreed to this?" she asked.
The council is headed more by practicalists than idealists, Vedrig admitted. They were promised a reduction in piracy affecting our own shipping in the region, and effective disruption of Alliance shipping which might divert Kelsey ships from the war.
There was a sweep of color up his flank, the equivalent of a dismissive, contemptuous sniff.
If memory serves, Cimbrian was the base of operations for these privateers.
What an extraordinary idea! But however competent or unusual these pirates, they're still pirates, and whoever stole the generator was no gutter criminal,
Mir scoffed.
If memory serves, Vedrig said slowly, the ringleader of these privateers is a human.
Myriad's disbelief only served to increase the hue of her flanks.
"Humans aren't magical, Counselor Vedregnanug," she chastised.
"No, but they... May I show you something?"
"In support of your claim? Very well."
Vedrig bowed his head and spread his arms, a gesture of thanks, and spoke to the office.
"Room. Access my personal entertainment files. Folder Earth. Search London Marathon," he intoned.
A chime indicated that the requested item had been found.
"Display."
They watched.
27 miles?
Myriad exclaimed after only a few minutes.
"In 3 hours or less," Vedrig added.
Myriad's flanks turned white.
"That could well explain the theft," she said. "The sensors on the ground weren't equipped to detect life forms."
"It is to be hoped," Vedrig said, "that this human's loyalty to their species is less than their loyalty to the pirate band they have formed. I will request a status update. Hopefully, this is just a case of pirates being pirates."
Myriad was clearly not hopeful.
"And if it isn't?"
"Then we had best start hoping that pessimist Furfeg is wrong."
Date point: 3 years, 8 months, 2 weeks, 3 days AV. San Diego, California, USA, Earth. "Hey, Dad." Gabriel relaxed. Fortunately, Adam Ares hadn't looked in his father's direction, and so didn't notice him lower the gun and relax. "Hey, yourself," Gabriel replied, stepping into the room and ruffling the scrawny teenager's hair. "Wasn't expecting you today, amigo." Adam pulled away from the hair ruffle. "Mom's being mom again," he said, which was all the explanation he needed to give. This wasn't the first time Adam had caught a cab over here to get away from her, and almost certainly wouldn't be the last. It was why he had his own key, and the superintendent knew his face and let him in the time his mother had confiscated it. "Okay, did you call Mrs. Amaldivar?" Gabriel's badge went a long ways towards smoothing things over with the DCFS, but it was still so much easier if their officer knew about these events when they happened, and heard them from Adam himself. He stuck the gun in the safe, the first thing he always did when he got home anyways, so fortunately there was nothing unusual there for Adam to notice. Adam sighed. "Yes, Dad, I called Mrs. Amaldivar," he confirmed, his voice full of all the weariness of a 15-year-old who had felt his competence was being questioned.
All right, whoa.
Adam had been watching a Game of Thrones rerun, and his ears went a brilliant pink as one of Emilia Clarke's innumerable skin scenes filled the huge TV.
Ah, shit. Sorry, Dad. I know it's a bit,
Adam stumbled.
It's cool, amigo. Just don't jerk off on my couch or nothing. Dad! Yuck!
Gabriel laughed and shucked off his running shoes, which he kicked into the corner. He stole a glance at the on-screen nudity again before groaning and stretching his way through the kitchen where he grabbed a cold beer from the fridge.
I can't be bothered to cook tonight. You want pizza or Chinese? He called.
Chinese, please. Gabriel knew his son's preference and placed the order. Hell, the people down at Dragon Chef probably knew their usual order by now, then slumped down on the couch, glad to be home.
Want to talk about it? He asked when the commercials came on. She treats me like an idiot, Adam complained.
Clearly, he'd been busting to get it out.
There's this girl at school.
Cool.
I asked Mom for advice, on how to ask her out. I don't even know why she got mad. She just started calling me a little sissy and...
She's been drinking again, huh?
Yeah.
They watched the commercials for a while before Adam wiped his eyes.
Fuck the courts, man,
he said, for about the 1,000th time since the custody hearings. Gabriel gave his boy a one-armed hug.
A couple more years, amigo. You'll get through it.
Yeah, she probably wouldn't let me date Ava anyway, Adam groused.
Ava, so that's her name. You were hanging out with her by the gates when I picked you up last week, right?
Yeah?
Shit, amigo. If you're going to let your mom stop you from asking her out, you're a dumbass, Gabriel said. Go for it.
What if she says no?
Gabriel suppressed a laugh. Little man, I saw the way she was looking at you. No way is that going to happen.
She was?
Adam looked stunned and delighted. But, nah, she wasn't, was she? Hey, I'm a cop. Reading people is my job. And here's a pro tip for you, amigo. If a girl's got all her weight on one foot like that and is playing with her hair and biting her lip, she wants you. You're just saying that. Google that shit, man.
They sat in comfortable silence until the food arrived, though it was plain that Adam was no longer watching the screen. He only spoke again when they were eating at the table.
So, what? Just ask her, is that it? That's it. How? What do I say? You like her? Hell yeah, I like her, Adam exclaimed. Why? Is it just because she's pretty?
She'd seemed more than that to Gabriel's eye from a distance, but he wanted Adam to have his priorities straight.
You think she's pretty? Adam asked. I'm older than you, amigo, not blind, Gabriel chuckled. Come on. Do you like her just because she's pretty, or is she clever, funny, what? Yeah, she is. Cool, lead with that. It's not hard.
So, what do I say? Adam persisted.
Gabriel shrugged. Next time you see her, after you've said hello, if there's like an awkward pause or something, you just say, hey, I really like you. You're funny, you're smart, you're pretty, and I was hoping we could go out on a date, something like that.
Adam looked blank.
That's it? He asked. That's it. It's not rocket surgery, man.
Gabriel grabbed the last dumpling and devoured it. For once, his son was too lost in thought to complain.
But what if she says no? He repeated.
Gabriel rolled his eyes and smiled, remembering how short his own self-confidence had been at that age.
Okay, compadre, what I'm about to tell you may sound at first like the bleakest and most depressing thing in the world, but I promise this is the secret to love, okay?
What secret? Gabriel leaned forward.
There is no such thing as a perfect girl, he said. There's no the one or your soulmate. I know you're really into her, and just trust your old man. She's into you too, but she's only human. If she does say no, then that's her loss, okay? It's not the end of the world. There's other girls out there, and it'll hurt and it'll be embarrassing at first, but you're tough. You'll get on with your life, and a handsome devil like you'll be fending the ladies off with a bat.
You're right. That sounds kind of shitty, Adam agreed with a weak smile.
Trust me, it's the best thing. You've got to understand, little man. Relationships don't just happen magically because an angel came down and touched you both, okay? That only happens in movies and pop music. You have to put work and effort into your girl. And it all starts with remembering that if she says no, then she's an idiot. And if she says yes, then she's the luckiest girl in the world, okay?
Okay.
Do you have a few date ideas lined up?
I don't know, a movie?
Bad idea, amigo. Movies are just a couple hours sitting in the dark ignoring each other. That's no kind of a date. You want to do something where you're actually interacting. Something she likes. And if you like it too, so much the better.
She likes the roller derby. She could teach me the rules while we watch.
Perfect.
Gabriel finished his food.
Hey, can you clean this up? I'm going to get your bedding out and hit the sack.
Sure, Dad, Adam said. And thanks.
No problem.
Gabriel stood, ruffled his son's hair again, and indicated the TV as he passed it.
Turn it off and go to sleep at midnight. And no jacking off on my couch. Dad!
Date point. 3 years, 8 months, 2 weeks, 3 days, AV. Planet Govendravadun, Dravignegrug, Navendarel Gureg, Agundavug. Governor Agavendragun Confederacy, Dominion Corps. Once Vedrig had departed, and his shuttle had cleared docking procedures and shot away to superluminal speeds bound for the council station, Secretary Myrid did something that, had anybody witnessed it, would have struck them as strange. She nodded off to sleep in her seat. A few seconds later, she woke, looking around as if thoroughly startled and dismayed. Flanks rippling like an explosion in a paint factory, she hastily began to check her files, notes, and appointments. Then she stared at the page, wondering why she couldn't read it. While the problem was occupying her attention, she idly wondered why her entire body was beginning to feel tingly and numb. She felt warm, though, and tired. Whatever it was she had been so agitated about could wait until, she yawned, until she'd had a nap. Half an hour later, her aide's frantic call to medical came much too late for Secretary Myrid. The cause of death was recorded as cerebral infarction. Date point. 3 years, 8 months, 2 weeks, 4 days AV. San Diego, California, USA, Earth. Welcome back. How was the East Coast? Cold, wet, and gray. 72 had made his position within the hierarchy through exclusive use of biodrones. A signature technique was necessary. Every number needed a unique angle, something that made them more suitable for certain niches than their fellows, and the biodrone angle had paid off beautifully in leading to the Earth assignment. These human ones bothered him somewhat, though. Despite being entirely slave to his will, they still retained an element of personality and a tendency towards talkative or even garrulous. Other numbers may have seen this as a liability, but the humans seemed uniquely capable of spotting a fake in their midst. The first-generation biodrones, the ones that had been truly limited in faculties and personality, had provoked remarkably strong negative reactions among the few humans with whom they had interacted. The uncanny valley, they called it. If it looked human but didn't behave enough like one, then it stood out, which was the precise opposite of what a biodrone was for. The successful newer models had much more mental flexibility, which wasn't comfortable territory to be in. That small hiccup aside, all it took to create a biodrone was one human and a little surgery, which, thanks to their uniquely sturdy biology, the subject recovered from the operations far more swiftly and was far more likely to survive them than any other sapient being that 72 had ever converted that way. He would have to archive their DNA for future cloning programs. Still, they weren't cheap or easy to produce. Losing one to Boone's ingenuity and paranoia had been painful, and no appropriate specimens for conversion had yet come his way. Being down to only 2 drones was making it harder and harder to keep pace with humanity's developments. It would be time to create a new one, soon. The biodrone was behaving a little strangely, he noticed. It seemed to be drowsy. Even as he watched, it nodded off on its feet, waking up again after a second with a start. "Are you malfunctioning?" he asked. The drone smiled a little peculiarly. "Oh no," it said, and there was a tone of voice there that didn't belong. Something that was jarringly different from its established modes of behavior. "I'm better than ever." Date point: 3 years, 8 months, 2 weeks, 3 days, AV. Today was technically the first of Gabriel's 2 days off a week, but he'd never learned the secret of leaving his work at work, or at least not in the cases that really mattered. After a breakfast of pancakes and a phone conversation with Mrs. Amaldivar, Adam had been granted leave to stay at Gabriel's apartment for a few days. Given that it was a school day, however, Gabriel had the place to himself for several hours. By the end of those hours, the table and the walls around it were covered in documents and photographs, with sharpied comments, observations, colored lines, speculations, and the fruits of his research and a few phone calls. None of it amounted to a breakthrough. "Hey, Dad, she said, whoa!" Adam stopped mid-celebration when he caught sight of the vast spread of information that sprawled all over the apartment. "She said yes?" Gabriel finished. "She did!" Adam looked like he couldn't believe his luck. "Geez, Dad, what's all this?" "Murder case," Gabriel told him. Adam picked up a photo from the table, a still of Johnson's face from the security cam footage, mercifully not including the victim's remains. "This the suspect?" he asked. "Give me that," Gabriel snatched it back. "Come on, man, you know this stuff's confidential." "Sorry, Dad. Seriously, though, is that him?" Gabriel relented. Despite his best efforts to persuade the boy towards a safer and more lucrative career, Adam seemed dead set on following his old man into law enforcement. He had to admit, the kid kind of had the brain for it. "That's him," he confirmed. Adam glanced at the picture again. "Looks about as average white guy as they come," he opined. "Yup, average height, brown hair, brown eyes, no distinguishing features, a face that can disappear in the crowd," Gabriel agreed. "And into thin air," he added in the privacy of his own mind. The vanishing act Johnson had pulled mid-video was causing him more and more alarm the more he thought about it. Half his day had involved taking a crash course in space-time distortion physics and the possible applications of the same reality-folding technology that allowed Pandora and her sisters to fly to Jupiter and back. Some kind of reverse stasis technology that massively accelerated the murderer's personal time, allowing him to move so fast as to disappear between frames, seemed the most likely explanation. But if he had something like that at his disposal... Adam continued to stare at the picture, clearly committing it to memory. He had a good memory for faces, all right. Gabriel had to give his son that. But Johnson was so generic that unless the kid was memorizing every wrinkle and fleck of white in the beard, and there was no reason to assume that Johnson had retained that beard after a flagrant public murder caught on film, it was a hopeless cause. "Come on, man. She said yes. Don't depress yourself with my work," Gabriel chastised him, starting to clear it all away. He really should try to relax when he was off duty anyways. "You've got a date." "Yeah," Adam seemed happier than Gabriel had seen him in a long time. "We're going to see the Derby dolls on Saturday." "Sounds like a good date," Gabriel told him. "You got anything to wear for it?" "Not really," Adam admitted. Gabriel nodded and stood. "Come on, then," he said. "Let's hit the mall." Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I am the Casual Deathworlder, your host, and this has been The Deathworlders, Chapter 14, Part 1. I hope you enjoyed listening to this as much as I enjoyed making it for you. If you did, please consider going ahead and dropping us a like down below, and if you're new here, go ahead and maybe consider subscribing. Okay, as always, huge shout out to Graygor, my editor, and a huge apology too for the mangled mess and audio jigsaw puzzle that I'm sending you. Yeah, I can hardly say my own name today. And good lord, trying to pronounce the name of the Governor Ag homeworld like 3 times. That word is like 50 odd letters long. It's huge. But hopefully it doesn't sound too terrible. Okay, and lastly, want to give a huge apology to everybody for the delay here. Once again, real life roared its ugly head and wound up having to work a whole lot of really weird and long shifts, so haven't been able to sit down and do recording in the last couple of weeks. Okay, so question. Being it is currently the 8th? Yeah, currently June 8th. What did y'all think of the SpaceX launch? Was that cool or what? Talk about the little flap that could. Okay, leave your answers in the comments down below, and I will see you all next time. Be safe, have fun, love you. Bye-bye.